So hello and welcome to the video. I currently hold 4 top tier memberships of frequent flyer programs. None of those schemes have actually sent me a card, although I'm sure I could have requested them. So I am going to set myself a bit of an editing challenge. So I have Emerald status within the OneWorld scheme through British Airways. I have Gold status in Star Alliance through Aegean. I have Gold status in the Sky Team through through ITA Airways, and I have Gold status in the Virgin Frequent Flyer Scheme too. To be honest with you, holding 4 top tier statuses is a bit daft. I've got relatively little value out of a couple of them. It's very unlikely I will be able to renew all 4, and it's very unlikely that I will ever hold 4 simultaneously again. But I got them largely with making this video in mind, and having any top tier status is pretty cool, and having 4 of them simultaneously has been quite good fun. So in this video I'll explain in detail how I got all 4 of those statuses, how much I paid for them, and how I plan to renew them, or not. And I'll explain how you can obtain multiple statuses for a relatively small investment of time and money, and in some cases for free. So if that sounds interesting, stick around! Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe and you might pick up some hacks, hints and tips to make your next trip better. My status journey began, as yours almost certainly will, by getting status in one scheme. I live in the UK, my home airline is therefore British Airways, so I got my first status through the OneWorld Alliance by travelling on BA and its partners. I said your journey will almost certainly start by earning status. There are 2 ways of achieving status. The first is to fly a lot in premium cabins and to earn status that way, or you can match across from an existing status you hold and gain another status immediately. So having status in multiple schemes will almost certainly require you to have status in one first. I can't remember a situation where an airline has given away status for free without any matching or challenge requirements. I'll talk about matching in a lot more detail later, but for now let's say matching offers you the routes to multiple statuses, but you will probably have to fly quite a bit to get your first. Some people will fly quite a lot with work, so may already have high status with a carrier. If that's you, you can skip this bit and move on to the section about leveraging one status to get multiples. But for many people, including me, I wasn't travelling much with work at the time, so I had to do the hard yards myself. I've made a few videos about BA and OneWorld and status, and I won't repeat that here, and I'll provide a link to those videos in the description below. I earned my current Gold status way back in 2019, before I even thought of having a YouTube channel. But that status will run until September 2023, as it has been extended a couple of times because of the you-know-what. Even though I didn't have a channel in 2019, I did know about tier points, and I set myself up a pretty good tier point run starting and ending in Bucharest. I managed to optimise that trip quite well, squeezed in extra legs within Europe, and ended up harvesting 880 tier points. That cost me £1,451, which is £1.65 per tier point. Not brilliant, but not too terrible either. And in my defence, I only bought that ticket a couple of months before travel, whereas buying 6 months in advance is when the best pricing can be found. I knew I'd get to the 1,500 tier points I needed for Gold with the second trip I had booked, so I didn't worry too much about harvesting extra tier points getting to and from Bucharest, so I actually redeemed some avios to get there and back. That second trip was to Australia, built around a Qatar Airways fare I found from Oslo to Southeast Asia. I paid £1,150 for those 560 tier points, which is over £2 per tier point, which again is not brilliant, but I thought that paying that much to get 2/3 of the way between London and Sydney in Qatar Airways business class was a pretty good deal. For this trip I did buy the extra 80 tier points I needed to achieve Gold by flying BA to and from Oslo in business class. That cost me £245, over £3 per tier point. I can only blame temporary insanity for that decision. But those two trips got me 1,520 tier points, which was enough for gold. They cost me £2,847, which is £1.87 per tier point. As it turned out, I earned another 30 tier points travelling to and around Australia, so I could have spent a little bit less on getting to and from Oslo, but you get the idea. I'm starting to plan my BA Gold renewal for next year, and I will make a number of videos about that process. And don't worry, I am expecting to pay quite a lot less to renew my Gold next year. When I started my channel in 2020, I talked a lot about BA and OneWorld, but I always intended to widen it to include the Star Alliance too. I needed to take a decision about which scheme to join. I had been a member of the Air New Zealand programme when I lived down under, but that didn't make a lot of sense now I was living in Northern Europe. So I made a couple of videos about the process I went through to pick a Star Alliance scheme. I'll link them up here and also in the description below. I plumped for the Aegean scheme, even though there were a couple of status matching opportunities around when I was looking, specifically with TAP Air Portugal and also with Turkish. As my ambition was to keep Star Alliance status indefinitely, I plumped for Aegean even though I would have to earn my status in the first year, because over a number of years it worked out to be the best scheme to join if you are looking at indefinite status. I then made another video about how I actually achieved gold, which involved 3 separate trips. That cost me a little bit over £2,000, but again I wasn't flying specifically with the objective of getting status. I was looking to take interesting flights on interesting airlines to interesting places, both for my own enjoyment but also to make good and interesting videos for you guys. This video talks about all of that and shows how you could get Star Alliance status for well under £1,500. So I chose to earn my first 2 statuses, which is one more than I strictly needed, but it worked for me. My second 2 cards came from status matching, so let's talk about that, and let's talk a little bit about airline economics. Airlines want profitable passengers. The most profitable passengers tend to be those who travel frequently in premium cabins. And those passengers tend to be the ones with status. So if an airline wants to dislodge a customer from their cosy and familiar routine with another airline, they often have to offer to match the status that might be held in that other airline to make the switch attractive to the customer. Doing so will cost them money in the short run, but they believe it will pay them back in the medium to long term. So why does offering status cost an airline money? Well, if you consider the food and drink that's offered in the lounge, the cost of operating those lounges themselves, the cost of bonus air miles your status may earn you, and indeed the costs of actually administering the programme, it all adds up pretty quickly. So giving status away is an expensive business and it is not done lightly. So many status matches come with a challenge element to them, particularly these days in the United States. For example, we will match your status for a short period of time, and if you do X, Y and Z in that time, we will then extend that status for the full year. My first match, which was with Virgin Atlantic, was in that mould. Virgin offered to match my status if I could prove I had status in another scheme, and also had made a booking in premium economy or in upper class on a Virgin Atlantic flight. So from Virgin's perspective, some of the costs of the match would be recouped from that initial booking that I needed to have made. I had already planned an upper class trip with them back in January, so I matched before I travelled, and so I travelled as a gold member of their scheme. I haven't got a lot of value out of that match, if I'm honest, which is another way of saying I haven't cost Virgin that much for giving me that status. I thought that I would travel with them again in that first membership year, but it's not worked out that I have. I've also not really benefited from travel with their partners, because all of those trips I've made have been in premium cabins where I've received the benefits of having gold membership anyway. But it was a match I'm still happy to have done, and it did earn me bonus miles on the trips that I did take with Virgin Atlantic and its partners. While we're on the subject of challenge matches, I did mention that TAP and Turkish were both options when I was looking to join the Star Alliance programme, and both of them had a challenge element to that match. TAP required you to buy some miles in their programme as a condition of the match, from which they would claw back some of the costs of having given you that match. From memory, it was a relatively small cost, and it did give you some points which you could then redeem on flights down the road. The conditions over getting a Turkish match have tightened a bit over the last couple of years and do now include flying a certain amount on Turkish. It's a bit complicated to go into detail about here, but suffice it to say it's not that difficult to meet that challenge if you do choose to pursue the Turkish option. So most status matches do involve an element of challenge, certainly the ones that I've seen recently do. Status matches with no strings attached do exist, and that was the fourth status match that I did across to ITA Airlines. They were a new airline that was building its business from scratch, and they were obviously keen to build a bank of loyalty program members. So they offered a challenge-free match. I sent across my BA details, and a couple of days later I was matched to gold status in the SkyTeam Alliance. That kind of offering is quite rare, but it is well worth considering if one comes along. Once again, I've not got a great deal of value out of that match, but I do have a couple of flights coming up where I will harvest some value. Certainly some payback for the enormous effort that went into getting that status. So that's how I got and currently hold 4 top tier statuses. I say top tier. British Airways actually has a layer that's arguably just higher than the gold level that I have, but I'll keep the top tier terminology so we all know what I'm talking about. I fully expect 2 of them to lapse. I have earned 250-ish tier points with Virgin, so would only need 550 more to retain gold. They have reduced their requalification thresholds. Virgin is the only airline I know of that offers tier points for travelling on a redemption ticket. It's very unusual for an airline to do that, so I suppose it might have been possible for me to do what I needed to do to get to gold, but it's just not been a priority. I will soft land for a year to silver, but the drop off between gold and silver in the Virgin scheme is quite significant, and it won't really make much of a difference to me having that silver status for another year. And I've no hope of maintaining my ITA status. I've not even looked at what would be required to do so. It was fun while it lasted, and it has contributed significantly to being able to make this video. I will retain the other 2 statuses. As I've mentioned, my BA renewal is next August-September, and I will be making a series of videos about how I go about and how I actually do renew that status. And I'll also retain my Aegean scheme. As I mentioned, I picked them because of the relative simplicity of renewing your status, and just based on the bookings that I've organically made, I'm just about going to renew that status without actually having to do anything extravagant or extraordinary, specifically with requalification in mind. So how do you find opportunities to match your status? Well, there are 2 answers to that question. A number of travel and points blogs will report on them when they crop up. I monitor quite a few of these, as you might imagine, given what I do, but the one I particularly recommend is Head for Points. You can either visit their site every morning as I do, or sign up for an email which will be delivered to you every day. Rob and his team are great at truffling out these opportunities, as well as reporting on any number of other topics that are relevant and interesting to people who are interested in collecting points and status. The second answer is a website called statusmatcher.com. This is a site which gathers matching experiences and attempts to present that information back to the user in an effective manner. But there's no way the experiences reported can be validated, so there is some absolute nonsense on there. Also, airline matching offers expire, and so positive experiences reported on the site may not reflect what is available when you are looking. Balancing that, though, is my sense that there's a negative experience bias on the site, as there is with a lot of review sites. People are more inspired to complain about a negative experience than they are to report a positive one, so the balance of experiences reported on the site may be slanted towards the negative. But it is by far the best matching resource out there, and is certainly worth a look. I suppose a third answer to that question is to just ask the airline. If you are a frequent premium traveller, you would probably be attractive to that alternative airline. So if you approach and ask them, they may well consider a match for you, even if there isn't a programme currently being advertised. So matches are intoxicating, and if you see a good one, it is very tempting to run and jump aboard. But if you do so with the ambition of maintaining status beyond that initial matching period, be sure to examine the requalification requirements in detail. I could very easily have gotten Star Alliance Gold through one or other of those matches, but I would almost certainly have struggled to retain that status beyond that first year. So there you go, how I got 4 statuses and how I'm going to be retaining 2 of them. All done with my new winter beard in development. Thanks very much for watching. Please give this video a like if you got something from it, and leave me a comment. Have you ever done a status match? Will you start looking for ones now? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you would like to support what I'm doing more directly, I have a little community of people that is developing nicely through Patreon. I'll put a link in the description below, but check it out. It'd be great to have you aboard, and I hope I'm offering some benefits that are real and tangible and that actually produce a payback on that investment that you might be making in the channel. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.